Hi everyone, so welcome to this video. In this video, we will try to understand Potter's five forces and we'll apply this framework by taking a real life example. So what is Potter's five forces? So Potter's five forces is a framework which is used to analyze an industry in which a business operates. So this framework was given by Michael Potter, who is one of the most brilliant minds in the field of strategy. So, what does this Potter's Five Forces framework say? So, Five Forces framework says that if you want to analyze an industry, then there are five factors or five variables which you should consider in analyzing the industry. So essentially, with the help of Potter's five forces, so let's say you are a new company or let's say you are thinking of a startup and you want to enter into a new industry, then this framework would help you kind of analyze what are the challenges you might possibly face if you enter the industry. So if you are aware of the challenges beforehand, then you will be able to better prepare the strategy to make for your business, so that your business, the probability of the success of your business increases, right? So this framework kind of is like will help you to evaluate the entire that business holistically, so that you get a sense of what could be the possible challenges you might face. So this framework says that in order to analyze an industry, you should consider or you should evaluate five factors. The first is competition. So how competitive is the industry, right? So if the industry is very competitive, then of course it's not good, right? Because the more the competition, so the more challenges you will face, right? Then what are the barriers to entry in this industry, right? So let's say if you are thinking of starting a business in a particular industry. Now if the barrier to entry is quite high, right, then you might need to incur like lots of cost, like lots of fixed cost to maybe set up the business. So for example, let's take the airline industry, right? If you want to start a business of manufacturing airplane, now that's not easy, right? The barrier to entry is quite high because you need to have a solid R&D, right? And then you need to invest a lot in setting up the infrastructure for you to manufacture planes. So the barrier to entry is quite high. You need to invest quite a lot, right, to enter that industry. So barrier to entry in the industry is another important factor which you should consider. Then supplier, right? What is the power of supplier? Now, in any industry, if you operate, so essentially what you will do, you will either be selling goods or services. Now, to sell the goods and services, so if you are selling goods, you will need to manufacture those goods. Now, for manufacturing those goods, you will need to depend on some suppliers who will give you raw materials, right? So, what is the sort of in that industry, how powerful is the negotiating power of the supplier? Now that is also very important. So let's say if the suppliers have a monopoly and they have a very strong negotiating power, then you can't, like, it's a negative thing, right? It's a challenge in the industry because the suppliers can choke your supply chain, and so you are heavily dependent on the supplier. So it is all very important to evaluate what is the power of suppliers in the industry. Then the other factor is power of buyers. So again, if you are trying to enter into an industry, then you will manufacture either goods or you will sell some services. So ultimately, your end product would be the consumers, right? The buyers. So I mean, they could be consumers, or they could also be enterprises, right? So maybe you may be selling in the B2B model, or you may be selling in the B2C model. So here buyer refers to the entity which will buy your product or service. Now again, as we discussed for the power of suppliers, so you should also consider what is the power of buyers. Now, if the buyer, right, has a higher negotiating power, it means that so let's say if your product is not very differentiated product and the buyer has various other options available, so it's very easy for the buyer to to leave your product and go and buy the product of the competitor. So here the power of buyer is very important. So how powerful is the buyer in the industry? That is also an important factor which could potentially pose a challenge, or which you should consider while evaluating the industry. And then power of not power of, what are the substitutes the buyers have in that industry. So for example, let's say, how to put it, let's take the cold drink industry, right? Now in the cold drink industry, what are the alternatives to cold drinks? So cold drinks are refreshment drinks which people consume when they want to celebrate, or when they want to, maybe even when they are thirsty, they will consume such drinks. Nowadays, with increased awareness about healthy drinks, non-sugary drinks, there are other substitutes which people consider more seriously. Maybe 15-20 years back, people used, like, there used to be a particular charm in drinking the popular cold drinks. But now, especially when people have become more health conscious, there are good substitutes, right, to the cold drinks, which are very high in sugar and potentially they are not good for your health. Nowadays, in fact, water is a good substitute, right? People prefer to drink more water than fruit juices, right? Natural fruit juices. So these are all important substitutes. So nowadays, if you evaluate sort of the soft drink industry, then like this particular force of substitute, that is quite strong, right? That is quite high compared to 15-20 years back. So you should also consider the power of substitutes. So these are the five sort of factors which you should consider while evaluating an industry, right? So let's take the example of the telecom industry in India, and let's apply this framework of Porter's five forces, and let's figure out how attractive that industry would be. So let's say you are you are thinking of a startup in the telecom industry. You want to set up a telecom house in India, in today's India. So just let's evaluate whether you should do that, what challenges possibly you could face, and how attractive is the telecom industry in India. So let's first start with the competition. Now if you look at the telecom industry today, I mean, it's kind of highly competitive, right? So you have Jio, which is kind of I think the market leader now. You have Airtel, you have Vodafone. So there are three competitors. Earlier, maybe 10 years back, there were even more players in the industry. There were 6-7 players. You had Aircel, you had Idea was there, Vodafone was there, Reliance was there, right? You had so many. So it was highly competitive. Now, of course, with the entry of Jio, some consolidation has happened, but still, it's competitive, right? Even 3 players are there, so it's quite competitive. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's not very good. Like for a new player in the telecom industry. So maybe we can call it as, let's have this factor as negative. Let's kind of mark it as negative, because it will pose a significant challenge. What about barriers to entry? So now, if you want to set up a telecom service or provide telecom service in India, you will need to enter a huge amount of fixed cost. Like there will be a lot of work you will need to do to set up the infrastructure, right? First of all, you will need to bid for the spectrum. Then once you have bid for this spectrum, you will need to set up, all those your mobile towers, and there you will need to put all those devices. You will need to create a pan India infrastructure, so as to make sure that your service quality is good. There is not interruptions, right? So to kind of provide the service, you have to expend a huge amount of effort in building the infrastructure. So the barrier to entry is quite high, right? It's quite high. So this is also negative, right, for the telecom industry, right? Let's look at the substitutes. Now, if you are entering into the telecom industry, what will be your main product? Your main product would be the service, the telecom service, which you will be providing. So people would buy your service, and which will enable them to speak to another person, right? Like that's the core product of the telecom world. Of course, now besides the core service of enabling people to communicate with one another, you will also provide data, and which will help users to access internet. So that's the sort of the product. But what are the substitutes nowadays? Nowadays, you have many of these tech giants who have their communication products like Microsoft Teams or or Google also has its communication product, and maybe on WhatsApp also. In many of the chatting apps also, you can do a video call, you can do a telecall. So there are a bunch of substitutes available, right? So this is also negative, kind of for the for a from the industry point of view. What is the power of buyer? So again, like essentially, a telecom, the core telecom product enables you to speak, to communicate with another person, right? So that's the core product, right? Now, as long as you are getting that product from any provider at the cheaper rate, you would go for it, right? Because it's not like a restaurant food that one restaurant maybe charges more, but that restaurant has a particular recipe which no other restaurant in the country would have. So if you have to eat that recipe or taste that food, you will have to go only for that restaurant, which is not the case with a telecom product, right? You just need to speak to another person, and if one provider is charging a higher amount, then you can very well go to another provider. I mean, as long as the service is decent, like you don't have major network issues, which the major players right now ensure that you don't have major network issues. I mean, you will be happy to switch to another player, right? Nowadays, the switching cost is also quite less, right? I mean, and you can retain your number also. So so the whole government policy has made it very easy for the buyers to retain their number and easily switch networks. So I mean, the policies of government have kind of increased the power of buyer, right? So in this industry, this is also kind of negative. What is the power of supplier? So in your telecom world, as we discussed, to kind of as we briefly touched upon in the barrier to entry kind of evaluation, you will need to set up your infrastructure. Now, for setting up the infrastructure, like you will need to work with various suppliers who would give you those equipments, right? Like nowadays. This whole 5G infrastructure is being set up, and a lot of companies are investing and putting that 5G infrastructure. So a lot of the equipments of this 5G infrastructure is manufactured by few players globally, right? So we all of course know Huawei is one major player, then Ericsson is another major player. So globally there are a few suppliers who kind of who specialize in the manufacture of these equipments. So yeah, I mean there are few suppliers. It's not that there is a monopoly of one supplier, but still you don't have quite a high number of suppliers, right? There are still a handful of suppliers who have a hold of the entire equipment, especially with now more and more new technologies coming up. The sort of kind of the influence of those suppliers would increase. So here also, I mean, it's kind of it's not as negative, but it's not positive also. So this force is also like will be a challenge, kind of. So let's put it as a negative only. So overall, we see that this telecom industry, as such, has lots of challenges. So if you are a new company and you want to, set up shop in the telecom competitive landscape in India, I mean, it would be tough. It won't be easy. So probably this analysis tells us that maybe it's not a very attractive industry for a new entrant to get into. At least the current state in which the industry is in India. So this is one example of how you can apply quarters 5 forces, and now you can apply this in any other industry. You can apply this in the airline industry. You can apply this in the soft drink industry, which we discussed in a bit like earlier. So yeah, that's all I have in this video. So thank you. Thanks for watching.